We have to harden our schools, not soften them up. A gun-free zone to a killer, that's like going in for the ice cream.
And why is it that we're held responsible when here you had a deputy who waited upwards of 4 minutes before they went in?
Shocking new numbers revealed the rising threat of the MS-13 gang.
During the Obama years, the gang knew about the lenient policies and was deliberately taking advantage of them. They've been on a horrific crime spree ever since.
The protection of these horrible criminals in California is a disgrace. If we ever pulled our ICE out, in 2 months they'd be begging for us to come back.
A Democratic candidate for Congress under fire for allegedly calling her opponent a crusty old Marine. Sarah Jacobs of California said the remarks were not aimed at her opponent.
The era of political correctness is over, and all I can say is hell yeah.
I do agree with that. Right. Too much sugar makes you sick. We have to start being truthful in this country and just tell it like it is.
Girls Just Want to Have Fun, best movie when I was a kid.
That's what this
Sister
is
and I, we memorized the entire script. We'd watch it and just say the lines. This is one of the songs in it.
This is one of the
Right,
greatest.
like
I love Martha and the
auditioning
Vandellas.
to be on
And
the
right
stage.
before the camera got here, she was dancing to it as well.
Well, it's just like that 80s dance movie. It was like, with their leg warmers. It was a great movie. Did you ever see it?
Great time.
Sarah Jessica
no.
Parker.
I think I have.
Long time ago.
Anyway, thank you very much for joining us. Brian is off today. Pete is in his spot.
for
We've
having
got a
me.
busy day. The president's going to be speaking at CPAC just about 3 hours from right now.
Yep, the Ambien is worn off. He's
That's
back.
right.
He's back from Israel.
Got back from
He'll tell us
Israel.
about his
Amazing
coming
trip.
up.
Slept on the way back. Thank
All
you.
right, meanwhile, let's talk about CPAC.
The president's speech is going to follow a series of powerful other voices, all the way from Vice President Mike Pence and other Republican leaders, including Wayne LaPierre from the NRA. They were all talking about safety in America.
That's right. Griff Jenkins live in National Harbor, Maryland, with what we can expect from there today. Griff, good morning.
Good morning, guys. I tell you, it was last year that I was in these halls when President Trump spoke to this crowd, the first sitting president since Ronald Reagan, to address them. They came in skeptical, and they came out just absolutely ecstatic at what they had seen. And now they get to hear, after a year of accomplishments, their president, their leader of a new conservative movement, President Trump, speaking again. That's at 10:05 today. But it was Vice President Pence yesterday who brought the House down and talked about an issue we haven't heard much about in just recent days, and that is something near and dear to this crowd: immigration. Here's what the Vice President said.
President Trump promised to enforce our laws, secure our borders, and today illegal crossings at our southern border have been cut nearly in half, and make no mistake about it, we're going to build that wall.
So, build that wall. They were fired up about that. This is the fire and brimstone crowd. This is the core of the base for conservatives, and they wanted to hear it. And the thing that they are really talking about in the halls, as I walk up and down here all day yesterday, is gun control. Wayne LaPierre, the head of the NRA, breaking his silence yesterday to this crowd yesterday morning. Here's what he had to say.
Evil walks among us, and God help us if we don't harden our schools and protect our kids.
To stop a bad guy with a gun, it takes a good guy with a gun.
It'll be fascinating to see what President Trump says, because he's sort of speaking to the entire nation today as they look for a solution to solve this senseless violence. But also, he's going to have to bring some pretty strong rhetoric, because that's what this crowd wants. And there's going to be a lot of other good speakers today. Energy Secretary Rick Perry, as well as Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, and our own Laura Ingraham, as well as Kellyanne Conway. Going to be an exciting day, guys, but this crowd's already fallen in. They're fired up and ready to go.
And folks will be able to see the president live right here on the channel. Griff, thank you very much.
Griff, thank you.
Also, you will see Rick Perry, the Secretary of Energy. He's going to be on this show just about 15 minutes from right now.
And as the vice president pointed out from the podium yesterday at CPAC, he said, this is the conservative president we have been waiting for. And he went through the entire litany of what's been done in the first year. And if you're a conservative and love this country, you couldn't help but stand on your feet and give an ovation to what has been done over the last year. A lot of execution on things that have been promised for a long time.
Yeah, yesterday he sat down, the president, with law enforcement to continue that listening session about how we can make our schools safer. The message, it seems, over the last few weeks has been safety, whether or not that's on the border or whether or not that's in our schools.
Sure. And, of course, the president has mentioned maybe we should increase the age where you can buy one of those long guns to 21, expand background checks. Those are two things the NRA does not like. But the president also has kind of floated this idea, you know, schools are gun-free zones. And so maybe if the bad guys didn't know whether or not a random teacher in a school might be have a concealed carry permit, maybe that would not only be a deterrent, but it would also be one line of defense. It's interesting article today in the New York Times talks about how a lot of educators have come out and said the last thing we want to do is turn our teachers into guards. But apparently there are dozens of schools scattered across the United States where they actually have teachers who are armed.
We interviewed that sheriff, and he said, I'm offering free training to any teacher, and he had said hundreds of teachers have signed up for it. So a lot of teachers are in support of this. And then the president mentioned possibly giving them bonuses if they get their concealed carry licenses.
That's right. Pardon my skepticism that the New York Times may have talked to a certain particular set of teacher. I know a lot of teachers out there that would love the ability to responsibly carry concealed, because what the president said yesterday at that roundtable is it's not just about defense. Part of hardening is giving a good guy the ability to go on offense. Listen to what the president said.
Unless you're going to have offensive capability, you're wasting your time. You're wasting your time. I want to end the problem. I don't want to have it where this happens again. And unless we're going to have an offensive capability, it's going to happen again and again and again, and it's going to be the same old story. We have to harden our schools, not soften them up. A gun-free zone to a killer or somebody that wants to be a killer, that's like going in for the ice cream. That's like, here I am, take me. We have to get smart on gun-free zones. When they see it says this is a gun-free zone, that means that nobody has a gun except them. Nobody's going to be shooting bullets in the other direction.
Well, now, here's the problem. The president may say we need an offensive capability. Here's the problem down in Parkland, Florida. And that is, it was announced yesterday by the sheriff down there that apparently a school resource officer with a gun was on campus, and they wondered, where was he? Why didn't he respond? As it turns out, he was standing outside the building. The shooting inside the building lasted 6 minutes. He stood outside for 4 minutes, apparently waiting for backup. Deputy Scott Peterson, who's been with the school for about 10 years, yesterday he was, first of all, suspended, then he resigned, and then he retired.
A deficit of courage, definitely, and clearly he didn't have the training to be prepared to respond either. So if you're going to arm teachers responsibly, then you would also give them guidelines about how and when to respond.
What do you think happened? Was he just too scared? He heard the gunfire
Listen, you hear
inside.
shots of gunfire. If you're an average person, even if you're carrying a gun and you're not trained, your instincts tell you to hunker down. They don't tell you to charge toward the hailfire bullets. You've got to have the courage to do so, and that courage comes with training because you know how to respond in that moment. I'm sure he's sitting there regretting his actions that day, but if more people were armed, then the chances go up that someone takes that courageous act.
Earlier in the program, we told you about a new report that is out that apparently MS-13 is now in 22 states and responsible for something like 207 deaths.
Murders,
and it exploded during the Obama years because of their lax immigration policies and allowing those undocumented minors to come in, turning many of them into DACA recipients. The president has tweeted about this separately in the last half hour.
MS-13 gang members, he says, are being removed by our great ICE and Border Patrol agents by the thousands, but these killers come back in from El Salvador and through Mexico like water. El Salvador just takes our money, and Mexico must help more with this problem. We need the wall.
To this point, Jessica Vaughn, she's the director of policy studies at the Center for Immigration Studies, which has looked deeply into this topic of MS-13. This is what she had to say on it.
There was this influx of illegal arrivals from Central America, mostly teenagers, but also some families with kids who benefited from the catch and release policies that the Obama administration had in place, and they were resettled in places all over the country, which happened to be those very same places where MS-13 has seen a resurgence. And the gang knew about the lenient policies and was deliberately taking advantage of them to build its ranks here, and they've been on a horrific crime spree ever since.
According to the report, half the crimes occurring in sanctuary cities where nothing can be done about it.
That's what the president is pointing out. So you have a catch and release problem, then you have a border problem, and then you have a sanctuary city problem. And it's why the president yesterday also floated the idea, hey, if you want to have a sanctuary city, then we could also pull out our ICE agents too, and let's see how that works out.
In California.
In California. He's talking common sense to a world where there are no borders, there is no enforcement, and then we wonder why gangs flourish. The president, when he talks about it, is delivering just simple common sense.
But when you see the numbers, 207 dead people responsible by MS-13, that is jaw-dropping.
Absolutely.
All right, let's hand it over to Jill. You know, has some headlines for us. Hello.
That's right. Good Friday morning. We are following some news right now, so let's get you caught up, starting with this Fox News alert. Alabama forced to postpone the execution of a killer dying of cancer who claimed his veins were too damaged for lethal injection. Medical staff not able to prepare Doyle Lee Ham before his death warrant expired at midnight. The Supreme Court giving the green light for the execution 3 hours after initially delaying it to consider his request. Ham was convicted of killing a motel clerk in 1987. And in Florida, an inmate who raped and killed a college student yelling murderers while being put to death by lethal injection. Eric Branch screaming and thrashing on a gurney before falling silent. Today, the president is expected to announce the largest sanctions package yet against North Korea. According to Reuters, he'll discuss the plans during his CPAC speech, putting pressure on the rogue regime over their nuclear missile program. We're awaiting that announcement as the president's daughter and advisor, Ivanka Trump, lands overnight in South Korea. She's leading the American delegation at the Olympics closing ceremony. The FCC announcing it will officially repeal net neutrality in April, but the changes won't come without a fight. In a desperate last-minute attempt to save it, 22 states, along with Washington, D.C., are suing the FCC, claiming there cannot be changes made to existing policies. In December, the Trump administration overturned the Obama ruling in which the government forced Internet providers to treat all data the same. The repeal will put that control back in those companies. An incredible biblical discovery in Israel. Archaeologists say they may have found the prophet Isaiah's signature. Take a look. The stamped clay artifact was found during an excavation near the southern wall of Jerusalem's Temple Mount. It's 2,700 years old. Experts say in ancient times, the seal stamp was used to sign off on documents or items. Pretty cool. Let's look at your headlines.
I was just there at that location 2 days ago. They're still discovering things that prove that Jews were there in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount, and it's an ongoing dispute, but they're finding more and more that proves the Bible for both Jews and Christians. It's amazing.
Putting it all together.
That's right.
I can't wait to go one day.
You need to go.
I'm going to go.
I'll take you.
I'm going to go. 12 minutes after the top of the hour, House Republicans want to know, what did the Obama administration know about the anti-Trump dossier, and when did they know it, despite this denial?
Director Brennan, do you know who commissioned the Steele dossier?
I don't.
Congressman Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan join us live on that next.
And these two were looking for love online. The only problem, they were also looking to plan an Islamic terrorist attack as well. We'll
They look so happy.
Looks a lot of love in that photo.
Right.
Today,
House Republicans launching phase 2 of their investigation into the anti-Trump dossier. They want to know what members of the Obama administration knew and when they knew it. Here to discuss, Congressman Mark Meadows and North Carolina, and Jim Jordan of Ohio. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it. Congressman Meadows, let me
be with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Congressman Meadows, let me start with you. So, in a letter obtained by Fox News, Committee Chairman Devin Nunes, Republican from California, posed a series of questions about the dossier. What do you anticipate they're trying to find out about who knew what and when?
Well, I think those 10 questions are key. Is who in the government knew what, and did they know that the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton had actually paid for it? It was interesting in the tease that you had with Brennan. You know, here you have an intelligence officer saying that he didn't know where the dossier's origination came from. Well, if he can't find that, he would have a hard time finding terrorists. So, you know, it doesn't pass a smell test. We've got to find out who in the government knew what.
Your reference is to Director John Brennan, who testified in May of 2017 that the Trump dossier was virtually unknown to him. Congressman Jordan, you've been all over this issue as well. Is it conceivable that in light of the case that was built on behalf of the dossier, that the former CIA director would almost know nothing about it?
Well, you would find that hard to believe, but that's what Devin's going to figure out. That's why he sent it to almost 24 members of the government, key people. You can probably guess who they are: State Department people, Justice Department people, FBI people, 24 people. And if they don't give him the answers, he's going to subpoena them. And that's what we have to do to get to the bottom of this. I think there was one other thing last week, Pete, that was really important. Tom Cotton, Senator Cotton's questioning of Director Wray. He asked him about Oleg Deripaska, Russian oligarch, and he said, was Christopher Steele being paid by this Russian oligarch during this time when he was putting together this dossier which was taken to the FISA court? And Director Wray's response was, I can't talk about that here. We can talk about that in a classified setting. So we don't know if the answer to that question is yes, but if it is, think about this fact. The Clinton campaign paid for the dossier, the Democrat National Committee paid for the dossier, and if a Russian oligarch was paying the author of the dossier at the same time, that is unbelievable. Now, we don't know, but that question, I think, sure raised suspicion and concern, just like this letter that Devin sent with his 10 questions that we got to get the answer to.
Absolutely. Congressman Meadows, just from the conservative perspective, very briefly, we only have 20 seconds here, on the gun debate, what aspect does the Freedom Caucus want to see of anything considered?
Well, I think what you found even as recent as last night, what we do know is the government was notified of a health concern. The government was notified by the FBI. And even last night we saw a government school resource officer failing to engage. More government doesn't solve the problem.
More government doesn't solve the problem. Sounds exactly like the baseline of what the Freedom Caucus stands for. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Pete.
You got it. All right. Well, she was running an illegal daycare, and she ditched the kids to hit the gym and get a tan. But that's not even the worst part. You see that? Gym, tan, prison. And parenting kids in a digital world. Actor Kirk Cameron just studied how to balance all of it. He is here live with what he found out next.
Time now for your news by the numbers. First, 12 years. That's at least how long these ISIS lovebirds, who look so happy, will spend time behind bars. The Mohammeds, Miramar Mohammed, was sentenced to life, and then his girlfriend was sentenced to 12 years for planning an attack in the UK after meeting online. Next, 11 million. That's about how many illegal immigrants were living in the U.S. in 2016, according to a new report by the Center for Migration Studies. It's the lowest number since 2003, the change attributed to a drop in the number of Mexicans entering the country. Last 4 years, that's how long the kids of a fallen officer will attend college for free. Otterbein University in Ohio announcing full ride scholarships to Westerville police officer Eric Joring for his 4 daughters. He was shot and killed in the line of duty earlier this month. That's amazing.
God bless them and good on that university.
God bless them.
Yeah,
yes.
sure. Right. Well, a new documentary from Kirk Cameron, who's sitting right next to me, you just heard him, examines how to better prepare kids for an ever-changing digital world obsessed with social media. Listen.
There's constant reinforcement, pings, tings, new friends.
They're concerned and legitimately concerned about the influences of media, mass media, social media.
It's as new to us as it is to our kids. There are so many choices.
They call it like fatty. You're just so dumb. The words they start giving you is the words you believe.
Wow. It's a great documentary. Here with more on it. It's called Connect. Is actor, producer, and father of 6, Kirk Cameron. Kirk, good morning to you.
Great to see you guys. Thank you.
Well, you got 6 kids, and you're wondering what they're doing online, and that was the quest, wasn't it?
It is. I think that's the universal concern of all parents whose kids use a phone or an iPad is, what is this doing to their brain? What is this doing to their ability to relate to their friends, their family? They're getting their ideas about the whole world from this little device. And My wife and I wanted to get in front of this whole thing and not do damage control, but actually learn from experts how's this affecting our kids and what can we do to help prepare them to be champions with their eyes wide open, doing good things with technology, not being harmed by it.
So one approach is to say you don't get any technology at all. The other is to, so where do you try to find that balance so that their identity is not grounded in something digital? That's the whole point of the movie.
Excellent. That's what Connect is all about. And I wouldn't throw my car keys to my 10-year-old and say, have a great time, although I want them to drive eventually. I'd sit them next to me and say, let's drive down the street, around the block, until you, same with technology. My wife and I say, let's learn how to use this account. Let's do this. But an open internet connection can lead to pornography, exposure to predators online, to incredible addiction to that kind of technology. And I think we as parents need to stay connected in rich, fully engaged relationships with our kids. That's the big message of Connect. Giving parents real help, connecting with their kids, preparing them, and keeping them safe.
What was it that made you want to do this project?
I started hearing stories and even the reports from the founding Facebook president saying God only knows what this is doing to our kids' brains. They don't want their own kids on their own platforms. And I saw the top of my kids' heads too much as they're looking at this, not talking to each other, texting people at the same table. And I thought, you know what? Surely this is something we need to pay real close attention to.
Okay, so there are programs where parents can monitor your child's online presence. But at what age does a parent turn it off? It's like, okay, you're on your own now.
I think every parent has got to make that call for their own kids, and it's different for each kid in your family.
Sure.
So for us, you know, we would give freedom and responsibility as our kids were able to handle it, because I want them to. I love technology, and I want them to be able to use it for good. So how's the parent going to know the right time? By being in relationship with them. Don't look it up on Siri. She doesn't know. You know because you're their parent.
It's only going to be on for 2 nights next week, Tuesday and Thursday, 7 p.m. your local time, connectmovie.com. Now, do your kids know that you were like the heartthrob? You were on my wall, a big poster on my wall. I remember the first time I interviewed you, I'm like, oh my word, I'm interviewing Kirk Cameron.
You know,
I wrote you letters when I was a kid, Kirk.
She did.
I feel so guilty now that I didn't write you back. I'm so sorry.
You did not
connect.
I didn't connect.
What do your
with
kids say
Ainsley.
about it, though? Did you show them? You were on like Teen Beat and Tiger Beat.
Whenever they see those posters from Teen, they hang their head in shame, and they're just like, Dad, these are blackmail photos. Please don't let my friends see those.
I think he wrote you back, but a responsible parent intercepted those letters.
Could be.
Probably so.
With you.
Probably so.
Well,
Yeah,
we're
we know
looking
my dad.
forward to the movie.
Thank you.
It's in the theaters, by the way, so go to connectmovie.com so you can get tickets and you can go to your local theater and have a nice event with some popcorn.
And bring your kids.
Yeah.
So it'll start a conversation with them about this subject.
Those make me so sad, that little boy saying all the names that people called him.
Yeah, it's a whole new world.
It is.
We're pioneer parents.
Such an important topic that everyone doesn't know what to grapple with. So thanks for helping us out.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thank you.
God bless.
All right. Energy Secretary Rick Perry set to appear at CPAC today, but before he does that, he's going to join us live coming up next.
And she wants to be the next member of Congress. Her campaign strategy, attack her veteran opponent as a crusty old Marine.
Probably not smart.
How's that working? Not well.
Nailing it.
In the middle, baby. Why don't you just meet me in the middle? I'm losing my mind.
Well, at 10 o'clock this morning, the President of the United States is going to be talking to a packed house over in National Harbor, Maryland, which is just across the Potomac from Washington, D.C. One of the other speakers is Rick Perry, former governor of the great state of Texas. He's also currently the U.S. Secretary of the Department of Energy. Mr. Secretary, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning, you all.
It's great to have you. We're going to play a soundbite for you because having lived down in Texas your whole life, you're very concerned with immigration. Here's the president yesterday talking about if California is going to be a sanctuary state, maybe the federal government should pull the ICE guys out. Listen to this.
Frankly, it's a disgrace. The sanctuary city situation, the protection of these horrible criminals, you know, because you're working on it. And the protection of these horrible criminals in California and other places, but in California, that if we ever pulled our ICE out, if we ever said, hey, let California alone, let them figure it out for themselves, in 2 months they'd be begging for us to come back. They would be begging. And you know what? I'm thinking about doing it.
Well, Governor, what do you think?
Well, I think that this whole issue of immigration has always been an incredibly difficult one. If it wasn't, it would have been done a long time ago. The president is a first-rate negotiator, and I will suggest to you that that's what's going on. He's clearly sending some messages, not just to California, but also to Congress. So I feel quite certain they'll get it all worked out and get this country safe and get an immigration plan in place that indeed does what I think most Americans want to do. I'm sure we know who everybody is that's coming into this country. A clear line to become American citizen, and the rule of law standing and holding the day.
That's right. Well, Governor, he also tweeted this morning that the wall is a big part of that, and I know you've been supportive of that also. But part of the reason you're at CPAC and what you're talking about these days and emphasizing is, as the Secretary of Energy, you're forming a new office there on cybersecurity, energy security, and emergency response. If you can, describe that new initiative.
Well, clearly, cyber is the new frontier, if you will, from the standpoint of cyber warfare, attacking particularly the electrical systems, the grids. We saw Ukraine attacked both in 2015, 2016 by the Russians, and we saw ransomware shut down an entire hospital this last year in this country. So cyber warfare is very serious. People's lives are in jeopardy. The Department of Energy is the sector-specific agency to protect those grids, electrical grids, from the cyber type of attacks. We work with other agencies as well, both the DOD and others, dealing with the cyber issue. So we look at this as one of our most important jobs to protect American citizens, protect wherever they might be. And innovating rather than regulating is the real difference between this administration and the previous administration. We believe that we'll come up with innovation rather than just government regulating and putting another law on the books. You're going to see some really, I think, leading-edge innovation. We have the biggest supercomputing capability in the world in the United States. 5 of the fastest supercomputers belong to the Department of Energy. So you'll see our data analysis being a great deal of this, as well as we move towards the exascale model. And DOE is right in the middle of all of that.
Mr. Secretary, will you explain what this means in layman's terms to the American family? Are we talking cybersecurity like preventing hacking? Are we talking preventing our nuclear plants from being attacked? And what is a supercomputer?
Yeah, and all of the above. When we talk about protecting the American citizens from a cyber attack, we're talking about viruses that can be put into systems that can lay there literally for years undetected previously. And we have the ability now with our computers that, and a supercomputer being one that has the ability to move at such massive rates of data through there and extraordinary speeds, to be able to analyze just massive amounts of data. We're moving into machines that what we call machine learning, on the edge of artificial intelligence. I mean, it is moving at incredible fast pace. The Department of Energy is keeping up with that. We got 17 national labs that are, the vast majority of them have some role in this cybersecurity business.
Well, that's great. I'm glad that you're being vigilant. Meanwhile, you're there at National Harbor at CPAC. You're going to actually turn around and go up to the stage in a little while and give a speech. What are you going to tell folks?
Well, I'm on the stage with Ryan Zinke. We're going to talk about energy independence and the total change in the world energy-wise. 15 years ago, the United States was dependent on a lot of countries that didn't necessarily weren't necessarily our best friends, let's put it that way. And today, the United States produces more oil and gas than any other nation in the world. Our ability to geopolitically affect the world with energy is one of the things we're going to talk about. The federal lands and opening up those federal lands, of which Ryan Zinke and the Department of Interior have oversight, will be part of that conversation. We're also going to talk about some interesting things that we do that people might not think our agencies would be involved with. For instance, the Department of Energy stands up a Office of Veterans Health Care. You all know my interest in veterans back through the years, and we're going to be able to use our national labs looking at some very non-traditional ways to address veterans' health in a program called MVP, which is million veteran program, doing DNA tests on 1 million veterans and being able to give them some advice on what you need to look out for in the future, because we've looked at your DNA all the way to some very innovative ways to deal with post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury.
That is great. Wow.
Some interesting stuff. I had learned a little bit about it, but interested in learning more. And what the main point of your speech, from what I take away of it, is what was a liability once on energy is now a massive point of leverage, and this administration has made that a big focus. It's great to see.
Yeah, and I talked about cybersecurity and innovation versus regulation. This is really down that path, if you will, because innovation is what has completely changed the energy scenario in this country. The previous administration just wanted to regulate it.
All right. Day 2 of CPAC in Maryland about to commence out there in National Harbor. Governor, thank you very much for joining us live.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Good to be with you all. So long. Godspeed.
All right.
Godspeed. That's so fascinating. If they could determine if you're prone for PTSD or what you're prone by just looking at your DNA.
Well,
yeah.
Things that are genetic, sure.
Yeah.
I've talked to the governor about it. If you can predict it, then you can get ahead of it.
Good idea. All right. Meanwhile, 20 minutes before the top of the hour on this very busy Friday, and Jillian's got some headlines.
That's right. Good morning to you guys. Following a number of stories, starting with this, a man intentionally smashes his car full of gas cans into a Connecticut hospital emergency room and lights himself on fire. Stephen Ellum streaming the whole thing on Facebook Live, referring to himself as Jesus and calling out the president. Police say Ellum's been on their radar since he was just 14 years old. His motive is still unknown. Right now, he's in critical condition. No one else was seriously hurt. Jim Tan Prison, the owner of an illegal daycare center, facing 35 years behind bars, pleading guilty for ditching 7 kids so she could go work out and tan. Police arresting January Netherland last year after finding the unattended children drugged with sleeping medicine at the daycare in Oregon. Officers say Netherland left the children, who were all under 5 years old, home alone for 2 hours. A heroic police officer quick on his feet, catching this child falling from a 3-story balcony. Just watch this video again. The moment caught on surveillance camera in Egypt. These 3 officers were guarding a bank across the street when they noticed the 5-year-old dangling and struggling to hang on. The impact knocking the officer off his feet, but thankfully he and the child walked away unharmed. Hail Mary full of net, a pastor and high school headmaster delivering the best skyhook, swishing a basketball all the way from the 3-point line. Watch.
Israel!
As you can see, the students going absolutely wild over Father Edwin's impressive shot at St. Benedict's Preparatory School in New Jersey. That's pretty cool. Love when you see videos like that.
That is
awesome.
great.
Right.
He's the priest, the headmaster, and a great basketball player. apparently.
Right, a shot. All right, Jillian, thank you.
All right, 42 minutes after the top of the hour. She wants to be the next member of Congress. Her campaign strategy? Attack her veteran opponent as a crusty old Marine. How's that working for her?
Yeah, I don't know if that was in the original strategy document.
Probably not smart.
Sometimes you change course. And a cop dad joins his little girl in ballet class. And now they are internet sensations for good reason. Father and daughter joining us live. Coming up. Maybe they'll show us the
Brian wanted to know if his pants were spandex.
It's your first.
All right, 14 minutes before the top of the hour, some quick headlines. Look at this video. Shocking bar brawl caught on camera. Nearly 24 people hurling their fists, glasses, stools, anything they could throw, as well as get their hands on. It's unclear what sparked the rage inside the Irish pub, the English pub that left one man hospitalized. At least one person was arrested. Look at those chairs. I'm tired of seeing people wearing their pants like that. If you don't like pants like that, you're not alone. South Carolina lawmakers introducing a bill to ban saggy pants across the state. Those who break the law could face a fine and community service. All right. Meanwhile, 13 minutes before the top of the hour, let's talk politics. Let's go out to California. Darrell Issa is retiring from Congress, and there are a number of people who would love to have his seat.
That's right. And I was reading my weekly edition of Cosmopolitan.
Oh.
And I'm a subscriber in case you
Usually
didn't know.
comes over the weekend, doesn't it?
Sorry. We came across a comment from one of the Democratic opponents who wants to have that seat.
Sarah Jacobs?
Sarah Jacobs, 29-year-old Democrat running to replace him, and was quoted in this article during a speech she gave as referring to her opponent as this. I think we have a full screen of what she said. She said, quote, "It's true," she says, Sarah Jacobs, "I'm not a crusty old Marine." And the article writes, the group was mostly silent, and it was awkward when she said that. So here you have a candidate implicitly criticizing her other candidates who are Marines or are veterans and saying, well, I'm not a
Well, they
crusty
asked her,
Marine.
they said, you're running in a district where there are a lot of Marines living here, a lot of military living here at San Diego. And she said, it's true, I'm not a crusty old Marine, because the guy she's running against, Doug Appleton, he has served our country as a Marine. So then she said later, that's not who I was talking about. I wasn't talking about him. It just looks suspicious. This was her response on Facebook. An article came out this morning that took something I said out of context. I want to make it clear this had nothing to do with Colonel Applegate. He was never mentioned, and I have nothing but respect for his military service.
Well, of course, that is what you would say after you would say something like that earlier, but there was apparently one other political strategist from another campaign who heard that and goes, quote, "That is a devastating error."
That's right. The article describes Sarah Jacobs as a Bitmoji using America's top model loving candidate, sort of the next generation. I think if you're going to be the next generation candidate, it's important to remember the previous generations and what they did for you, especially if they were a colonel in the military. So
if you're running for office, you have to be very careful of everything you say. And clearly, is that how she really feels about the men and women that serve our country?
Yeah.
I don't know. It just doesn't look good for her.
It doesn't. All right. Meanwhile, still to come, he was America's pastor, but Billy Graham was also a father. His son, Franklin, joins us live in the next hour.
Very cool. And a cop dad joins his little girl in ballet class, and the heartwarming moment, well, it's gone viral. Father and daughter are with us live. There they are in a few minutes.
So cute.
But first,
on this day, back in 1945, an Associated Press photographer snapped this famous photo of 5 Marines and a Navy corpsman raising the flag during the battle for Iwo Jima. And then in 1954, a group of children received the first injections of the new polio vaccine. And then in 1997, the Spice Girls were topping the charts with their hit song, remember this? Wanna Be.
The government was notified of a health concern. The government was notified by the FBI. More government doesn't solve the problem.
shocking new numbers revealed the rising threat of the MS-13 gang.
The protection of these horrible criminals in California is a disgrace. If we ever pulled our ICE out, in 2 months they'd be begging for us to come back.
He's clearly sending some messages, not just to California, but also to Congress.
America's pastor, Reverend Billy Graham, will lie in honor at the U.S. Capitol Rotunda beginning next week.
God has provided a way of forgiveness, and that's through faith in Christ. That was the simple gospel message that Billy preached, and millions of people responded to that.
We stand with the conservative movement. And come to think of it, we always stand for our flag and our national anthem as well.
Welcome to the Friday Dance Party edition, final hour, Fox and Friends.